Dun 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 dun. Hello, everyone. It is just me here on Friday night. It's episode 54 of the Friday Night Movie Club, and I'm rocking solo right now because, well, a couple of my guys are late, like they usually are. But I wanted to go ahead and get this show off the road because you know what? There's a lot of things tonight that I wanted to talk about, and you know what? Since I'm only here by myself right now, there's some chances that I can interact with some of you guys in the chat right now, just like our good buddy Duke Nukem joining us right out of the gate saying toothpaste isn't food. Yeah, I thought we already knew that, unless there's some other subcontext to this thing that I didn't understand here, but I thought we pretty much knew you can't eat toothpaste because this is not fact, not food. He says goofy intro song. You know what? I put a lot of work into that intro. Thank you very much. So what's up there, Duke? Top Dog joining us here tonight as well. Thank you for joining us here on a Friday night. There's a lot of things that I want to talk about tonight because tonight, as you know, we're going to be discussing the fourth Expendables movie, which is a movie I just saw a few hours ago, just got out of the theater a little while ago. I have a lot of thoughts to talk about that, kind of the franchise up to this point. But there's a few things that I want to talk about. Then, like I said, you guys can ask me questions here throughout the course of this night as well. But I want to start off with kind of the whole situation going on with the WWE at the moment because this is something that I found very interesting this week, just in case you guys hadn't been following this story here. But the WWE announced, I think it was yesterday officially, that SmackDown is heading back to the USA Network after a deal has been reached with NBC Universal. Now, there's a few things that need to be stated about this because I think if you're the type of person who has to have news confirmed to you by Sean Ross Sapp and Dave Meltzer, you probably have no idea what's actually going on with this story. Somebody like me who's been covering media and stories from the media for the last few years understands the story in a little bit more depth. And I think I understand, I have a little bit more context to what's actually going on here. So let's go ahead and bring this up here just for a second because there's a few things I want to talk about here with this story. WWE SmackDown is heading to the USA Network with a new rights deal with NBC Universal. Raw is still on the table. Here's what's really going on versus what this story here is talking about. The story here is that it was confirmed yesterday that the USA Network, which is owned by NBC Universal, aka Comcast, just came out and said that they are going to bring SmackDown back to the USA Network after I believe it's been almost 5 years since it was on USA. If I'm not mistaken, they were on Sci-Fi for a little bit there, and they moved to the USA Network when they did the SmackDown Live stuff. And then back in 2018, WWE announced that SmackDown was going to Fox for $1 billion, which means that for $200 million a year, essentially, because it was a 5-year deal, that Fox WWE would be on Fox. And at the time, everyone thought this was going to be a massive move. Everybody thought that this was going to be, the biggest thing in the world for WWE, because now they're on network television. They're not on cable anymore. They're not on, one of these rinky-dink Spike TV networks. They're on Fox. I mean, they're going to get advertisements during the Super Bowl with like 115 million people watching in the country. There's going to be advertisements on the World Series. Like, this was going to jumpstart WWE to a whole nother stratosphere here. And the reason why they paid so much money for SmackDown was under the belief that, hey, on network television, you're going to have more outreach than you have on cable. So we're expecting this thing to have about 3.5 million viewers weekly. And that was the expectation. That SmackDown was going to average 3.5 million viewers a week on Fox. And that was going to be the number that Fox expected and that they were going to be happy with. Here's the problem. The first night that SmackDown landed on Fox, they did about 3.8 million, almost 4 million viewers. Now, they had brought The Rock back that week. They had a bunch of big stars lined up for that one. I think that was when Tyson Fury had shown up. Cain Velasquez was there. So they had a lot of star power for that first episode of SmackDown on Fox. And it got a lot of attention. After that, the viewership absolutely cratered. I think they lost 1 million people in the second week, which is a massive drop-off. I mean, when you're talking about getting almost 4 million people to watch your show, and these are like normies, casuals who are tuning in, seeing, hey, what's the big hubbub about, when they watch your show, and then they watch it and be like, yeah, I'm not really that interested in watching this again. That's a big problem. That's a big, big problem. And they lost a lot of viewers right out of the gate. Now, by the time they settled in, they ended up averaging about 2.1 to 2.2 million viewers for a number of years. And this is what you have to understand. They had the Super Bowl was advertising SmackDown. That's 115 million people in the U.S. advertising SmackDown, and I'm pretty sure they didn't actually pay for it because it was a network thing. So they even saved money on that type of advertising, and it still did absolutely nothing. And they advertised it on the World Series. So what was happening here is that they were trying to put this up with normies who weren't pro wrestling fans, or maybe they were a lapsed pro wrestling fan, and they presented them, hey, SmackDown, Roman Reigns, John Cena, all of these names, and people didn't care. People generally just didn't care. And for the next few years, SmackDown averaged about 2.1, 2.2 million viewers a week. That was their average. When they moved the show to Fox Sports, they got less than 1 million viewers, which is terrible. So the last few years, everyone within the media side of things knew that Fox was not happy with this deal. They knew that Fox was not happy with this deal. They knew that Fox was not pleased with the numbers that they were being presented with, because they had an expectation of 3.5, and they were doing just barely over half of that. That's how bad the numbers were. But everyone kept saying, oh no, this is a great number. It's like when they started the Bloodline storyline, and that really started, cooking a little bit there, people were like, oh, SmackDown is doing 2.5 million. This is an amazing number. No, it's not. 2.5 million viewers is not an amazing number. That's essentially the same number that SmackDown has been doing for the last 5 years. So when people are saying that, oh, they did a 2.8 this week, that's great. It's like, that's still far below what Fox's expectations was, considering the fact that they're paying $200 million a year for this show. So Fox was never happy. So for the last 2 years, there have been rumors that Fox wasn't happy, and with the fact that they weren't happy, they were not going to renew the TV rights deal with WWE. Now, because Sean Ross Sapp never reported this, because Dave Meltzer never reported this, because wrestling fans who only get their news from those two people and don't actually go to actual entertainment sources for their news are under a completely different, let's just say, reality than everybody else, because they just thought that, well, if Sean didn't report it, then they must be happy with the deal. They weren't. So, to surprise to really no one here, USA has announced that they're coming back and they're bringing SmackDown back to the table after the Fox deal is done. Now, you have to be very careful about what you read here because there's a sleight of hand going on. Because on face value, this sounds like an amazing deal. When you look down here, let's go down for a second. WWE's newly created TKO group, which is obviously the UFC and WWE, both merged together under an Endeavor label. They've announced that they're going to agree to a 5-year domestic right media deal with SmackDown, meaning that after the Fox deal is over, which is next year, is when the Fox deal ends, that it'll leave Fox and go back to the USA Network. They're also going to go back to producing 4 specials on NBC Primetime, which is like the Saturday night main event type stuff. They're bringing that back as well. Raw, which is obviously currently on Raw, along with NXT, which is currently on Raw. Those deals are in place to expire next year. However, there has not been any announcement about those 2 shows coming back as a result of this. Now, the financial, numbers came out regarding this deal, and it turns out that SmackDown is getting about $1.4 billion in this entire 5-year deal, which translates to about $240 million a year. So, on face value, think to yourself, well, if they were making $200 million a year, now they're making $240 million a year. That's an increase, right? Well, technically, if you're going based off what SmackDown is making, that is an increase. But as you saw, the stock price after this announcement tanked. And it tanked because investors were not happy with what the amount actually was, because they were expecting more. And you think to yourself, well, wait a second, this is much more than what they were making before. How are they unhappy with this? Here's where you start getting into the real nitty gritty of this whole television debate thing here, is that if you look at what USA was already paying for Raw and NXT every single year, it was coming out to roughly about $240 million a year. They already had a big media rights deal with Raw, because Raw is a 3-hour show. It garners more ad revenue because it's 3 hours. And typically, at least, a few years ago, it used to be higher in the 18 to 34 demographic, especially as far as cable goes, because there wasn't really much competition on Monday nights for cable as it was. So if you look at what they actually did here, is that, okay, look, we'll take the money that we're paying you for Raw and NXT, and we'll allocate that to SmackDown. That way, we'll buy your top-rated show, because whether you like SmackDown's ratings or not, it is the highest-rated television show that WWE puts out right now by a lot. And it's like, you know what? We'll get rid of Raw, we'll get rid of NXT, and we'll just buy SmackDown. And that's essentially what we're going to do. So what they did is they essentially took the money that they were already giving WWE and said, you know what, you can keep your 2 television shows. We'll just take the highest rated one, which means that as of right now, neither Raw or NXT has a new deal set for it. Now, this could be a good thing and a bad thing for WWE, depending on how this whole thing plays out. Because with Universal giving that money to WWE, it's highly unlikely that they're going to show up even more money for Raw and NXT. So it looks like it's very likely that those 2 shows are going to be off of the USA Network in the next couple of years. And here's why. NBC Universal's already committed so much money to WWE as it is. Remember, they have the WWE Network on Peacock right now. That's worth $1 billion in total. So that's probably about $200 million a year they're making just off the network deal. Now you're having an additional $240 million a year for SmackDown now. So they're already investing $500 million into WWE a year, which I think is almost 50% of WWE's entire revenue alone, which is massive. So NBC is in a position where they really don't want to invest any more money into WWE than they've already given them. Because at the point, I mean, if you invest any more money into WWE, you're pretty much going to be like 75% responsible for all of their revenue, which means that outside of your company, the company isn't profitable like at all. I mean, if they were to pull the plug on the money they're giving them right now, they would be screwed. That's how bad it is. So this puts WWE in a position where it's like, okay, now we need to negotiate a television deal with a new network for Raw and NXT. Well, here's the problem with that, is that your options right now are extremely limited on where you can go with those 2 shows. First of all, if you're looking at Raw and NXT ratings wise, Raw and NXT have been doing terrible numbers for the last few years. Ever since 2013, I think Raw has lost about 60% roughly of its audience. If you go back to what was in WrestleMania 35, that was when Becky Lynch and Kofi Kingston and Seth Rollins were all champions. I think they had averaged like 3 million viewers a week at that time. They're now averaging somewhere about like 1.7 million weekly. And then I think last week's show actually just did the worst rating ever. It did like 1.3 million viewers, which is the lowest rating in the 30-year history that show's been on the air. So it's bad. Like it's really bad. On the flip side, if you look at NXT was only moved to the USA Network because WWE wanted the show to compete with AEW. And what was embarrassing about it is that even though NXT had been around for a number of years, everyone watched AEW instead because it was the new big show. And outside of maybe 1 or 2 weeks during its entire run, AEW smashed NXT every single week to the point where NXT had to eventually move to another night on Tuesday night. And even when they moved to Tuesday night, it still didn't help the ratings. They still lost viewers. I think NXT is averaging somewhere about 600 to 700,000 viewers a week. So it's not even a big draw with audiences. So where do you go? Where do you go at this point? Now, people have thrown out there, okay, well, maybe they'll go to Disney. They can go to ESPN or ABC or somewhere along those lines. Disney will take them. Well, if you guys have been following this channel long enough, if you've been listening to the Bar Room, Bounding in the Comics, whatever the case may be, you know Disney's not exactly in the best financial realm right now. They're hurting for cash. There's talks about selling off ABC, selling off ESPN. They're currently in talks right now with NBC Universal to sell off the remaining rights for the Hulu network. Disney has no money. Disney has no money, and a lot of people in the wrestling bubble don't understand that. Disney cannot afford a major rights acquisition right now when they're trying to sell ESPN. Like if you're legitimately trying to get rid of ESPN, you're not even thinking about buying WWE TV rights right now. It's just the way that it is. So Disney's off the table. Comcast is obviously out of the game right now. They're done. Okay, what about Warner Brothers? Well, Warner Brothers already has AEW. Now, the interesting thing about this is that Warner Brothers has not renewed their deal with AEW past next year. So there is a slight possibility there that Warner Brothers could look at the possibility of Raw and NXT being on the table right now and say, hey, you know what? I'd rather have Raw and NXT, two proven WWE properties on our network that we can build on, rather than take a chance on this AEW show where we're paying a lot of production costs and we're not really getting a lot of big return on there right now. So if I'm Tony Khan, that would worry me that Raw and NXT are up for sale right now and they haven't renewed the deal that they have with AEW. It's very possible that Warner Brothers can pull a deal with WWE and basically throw AEW to the wolves, which would... honestly, at this point, that might sink that company because they're not doing very well at the moment with numbers and viewership and even attendance, if you guys have looked at that. But the problem with that deal is that, much like Disney, Warner Brothers is also hurting for cash. They're still billions of dollars in debt, and WWE will be looking for a big deal, and Warner Brothers might not be in the market for that big deal right now. So that's an if, but that's a big, big if. So that's a very unstable situation there. What else do you have outside of that? Fox just said, no, we're not going to have SmackDown, so you know they're not going to pay any money for Raw and NXT, so they're also out of the game. The only major cable company you can have right now is Paramount. Paramount's the only other player in the game when you take those four companies out of the equation. And Paramount would basically be like CBS, Spike TV, or I guess it's the Paramount Network now. It's not Spike TV, or like maybe like an MTV, something like that. Could they make a deal for WWE? It's possible, but it's not very likely. But it's possible. That's your only major television outlet you have left. So you have two shows that need a home, but you don't have any buyers right now because all these media companies, for one way reason or another, are hurting financially, and they don't have the money to give you what you want. Which means that if you're going to get out of the TV game altogether, you have to go to streaming. That's your only other option. So your question is, who is going to take up the money to pay for Raw and NXT to have it on their streaming service so that fans can watch the show every week? There's talks about Amazon right now. I know Amazon's trying to expand their live sports catalog. They have Thursday Night Football every week, so they're trying to expand that whole thing. WWE will be a good expansion for them, but I don't know if Amazon's going to offer the money that WWE wants. But if WWE wants to, I guess, have those shows remain, it might be their best option. I think Amazon is their best option. I would not be surprised to hear in the coming weeks or the coming months WWE agreeing to a deal with Amazon to bring Raw and possibly NXT to Amazon Prime. Another streaming service that could take WWE right now is Apple, because if you're talking about trying to get the most money out of someone, Apple is a company that has a lot of cash flow. So if you're looking at trying to get a $200+ million deal for these two shows, Apple has a lot of money to throw around, and they would love to have a live wrestling show in their catalog to show off. Now, I don't know if Apple TV has the capability just yet. I do know they simulcast some of the Major League Baseball games at the moment, but I'm not sure if that same thing would work with like pro wrestling and how that would differ. It'll definitely be a change. Now, the other danger with that, if you're going to streaming, is that if you're getting 1.3 million people to watch Raw right now and only like 700,000 people to watch NXT, if you move the streaming, those numbers are going to plummet even further, because now you're asking people to get an entirely different streaming service like Amazon Prime or Apple TV just to watch your weekly NXT and Raw shows. And there's a lot of people right now who like the convenience of cable who probably don't want to invest even more money just to watch a subpar 3-hour or 2-hour show. So a lot of people might not go over there. Now, you'll still get the money. You'll still get whatever Amazon or Apple pays you, but your audience is going to tank. Your audience is going to tank. You're not going to get as many people watching your show week to week, which would severely hurt WWE's program on the Raw side of things. And then NXT, you got to ask yourself the question at this point: how much of a draw is NXT right now in 2023? Like I said, for the last few years, it's only been roughly 700,000 people, sometimes even less people, watching NXT from week to week. It's not a big draw. If we're being honest with ourselves, NXT was never a big draw. Even when it was on the network, it was losing somewhere about $30 million a year because they were never in a position to actually draw money to begin with. And it hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is that less people are watching the show now than they were 5 years ago. So that's kind of where WWE is right now. And WWE, I think, lost like $15 on their stock price as a result of this, because they realized that, hey, look, you were supposed to be getting more money based on this. You basically just got the exact same amount of money from NBC. It's not more that you were actually getting here. And now you have to shop around two shows. If you can't find a home for NXT, you're going to lose money, which means that more people are going to have to get laid off and fired. If you didn't know, there was a lot of layoffs this week in WWE. A lot of wrestlers got fired. I'm surprised that it was only like 14 people. I expected it to be more, considering the fact they have like 240 people on the roster at this point. But they got to make some decisions here. Now, like I said, I think the best case scenario for WWE is that they move Raw and NXT to Amazon Prime and get a big money deal with Amazon that will at least, I guess, core some of the concerns that Wall Street has about the future of their programming, because I can't see them going to any other television network at the moment, because there just simply isn't any television networks out there that are willing to pay the money that WWE wants. I think Amazon and Apple are the only two options for them to go right now if they want to keep moving steady. Because if they take less money or somewhere else, their stock price is going to tank even more, and it's not going to be a good look for WWE. But that's basically like where they're at right now. A couple of notes right here. So it's like NBC sounds like they're not really happy about Raw's ratings. Yeah, and then this is the thing. So I don't think they're too happy about Raw's ratings or NXT's ratings because they both had much higher expectations for both of those shows when they signed those massive deals a few years ago. Because remember, these deals were renewed, I think, back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And both shows were doing far better in 2019 than they're doing now. I think Raw was near 3 million viewers a week back in 2019, somewhere like right above 3 million. Now they're only down to like 1.7, so they've lost half their audience in that time period. And then NXT was supposed to compete with WWE, not WWE, but AEW and beat AEW, but NXT has consistently gotten destroyed ever since they've been on there, and that hasn't happened at all. So I don't think they're happy with that. I think they're like, hey, you know what? We'll take the money that we're already giving you. Give us SmackDown. You guys can do what you want with these other two shows, but we want the show that's actually going to bring the viewers. And SmackDown has been doing a much better job drawing numbers than Raw has. And then you have to keep in the context that the numbers that SmackDown has been drawing is still so bad that even Fox is like, yeah, we don't want this either. So don't listen to the dirt sheets who are only going to report things that make Triple H sound good so they don't have to, so they can keep getting their access to the stars during these like fake press conferences and stuff like that. None of the networks are happy about the numbers that WWE is doing. None of the networks are excited about the numbers that they're doing. And even look like AEW. Don't let Dave Meltzer convince you that, the networks, the Turner executives absolutely love AEW. If they absolutely did, guess what? They would already have a deal announced right now, and they haven't announced that deal. I know there was a story going out earlier this week that, hey, I think AEW is going to go to HBO Max. They're going to go to Max. Max announced that, yeah, we're going to have live sports on HBO. Guess who didn't get announced? AEW. And there's a reason for that. So, like I said, don't listen to the dirt sheet writers to get your entertainment news. You have to go to the actual entertainment sources to tell you what's going on, because these guys only know what's going on in the context of pro wrestling. They are not looking at the bigger picture here whatsoever. If NXT is not renewed, can we blame Becky Lynch? Sure. I mean, let's be honest. Becky Lynch, so she was on NXT a couple weeks ago, and I think they did like 900,000 or somewhere like around those lines. And then people were trying to say, "Oh, she's a ratings draw." Well, I mean, she was also on Raw too, and they just did the lowest rating they've ever done. But people are obviously trying to make Becky Lynch seem like she's a bigger star than she really is in reality. And this all started with the man stuff that they did a few years ago, like 2018 or something like that, or Becky got over only because people hated Charlotte Flair, and they pretended like Becky Lynch was great because they hated Charlotte Flair. But Becky Lynch, after all of these years, has regressed in a lot of ways. She looks terrible. But I don't know, what I know, she had a kid, but I don't know if it's her diet or what she's doing behind closed doors, but she looks frail. She's lost a lot of weight to the point where her face looks sunken in. She doesn't look go back and look at pictures from Becky Lynch from 2017 versus what she looks like 2 weeks ago, and it's a complete night and day difference. And it's only been 5 years. It hasn't been that long, but she has not looked great. Her promos have not gotten any better. She's still trying to do the Becky McGregor impersonation, but she's still out there cutting NXT style promos that she's never gotten better at. And I think the one she cut last week was horrible. Even people on the internet was roasting her because of how bad it was. It's NXT is not the draw that a lot of people think that it is, and the numbers are showing that, and even a lot of the other shows are showing that as well. Exactly. If both shows aren't renewed, you can definitely blame Becky Lynch at this point. NXT is probably going to get a bigger money drain since the original XFL. Yeah. Because, like I say, even when NXT was at its height, we're talking about 2015, 2016, that time when they had all the guys that were freshly from Ring of Honor and New Japan and Impact and all those guys, they were still losing $30 million a year because they weren't in a position where they were making money off of ticket sales because they were at Full Sail. So they weren't making a whole bunch of money off of ticket sales. They had to spend a lot of money on their production. So they were probably blowing nearly $1 million a week on production alone. Then you have to sign these talents to I guess, sort of main roster style deal. So there's where guys probably making six figures on the NXT show, so you have to do payroll as well. And when you put all that together, there's not a whole lot of actual revenue coming into the company. So even though those guys that those shows were able to talk about, oh, the Adam Cole versus the Johnny Gargano matches, this is amazing. It's like, yeah, but they weren't making any money. Like, I don't think they actually started making money until they got the TV deal with the USA Network, where the USA deal like kind of covered the majority of the production cost to where they were being a bit profitable. But now that that's in question now, I mean, if they lose that television deal and go somewhere else, they could be right back to not making money again like they were a few years ago. Top Dog saying, I thought we were in a wrestling boom period. Yeah, it's funny, right? Everyone will talk about the wrestling boom. Wrestling is back and all this old nonsense, but now we're seeing WWE. And this is something to keep in mind. Even if you're like an AEW fan, you have to keep this in mind too. What you're seeing right now is that WWE is struggling to get TV deals that satisfy their investors right now. WWE is the biggest wrestling game in town. So when the number one company in the world is struggling to get money out of the biggest TV networks in the country right now, what does that mean for AEW? Because if WWE is having Fox say, no, we don't want to invest, if they're having NBC say, no, we don't want to invest anymore, if the WWE is getting that kind of response out of these networks, what do you think that AEW is going to get? Like, where do you think? Put it to you this way: if Warner Brothers pulls a 180 and somehow, ditches AEW for was it Raw and NXT, where do you think AEW is going to go at that point? Like, where do you think they're going to go? You think that Fox is going to take AEW? They've been unhappy for the last 4 years with SmackDown's ratings, and SmackDown is the number one highest rated wrestling show on TV right now, and even Fox wasn't satisfied with those numbers. So you think that they're going to be impressed with AEW's numbers? You think the fact that AEW is doing a .23 in the 18 to 30 49 demographic, that somehow they're impressing any of these studios? Like, are you serious? Like, people, like I said, people are so drenched up in the wrestling bubble, they don't look at the big picture. And the big picture is that these wrestling shows are not drawing the money that you think that there are. And people have been, I guess, confused or brainwashed or maybe just misled into thinking that because WWE was getting all of these, all of this money from like NBC and Fox and stuff like that, that means that wrestling is back and is more profitable than ever. Like, no, they were just getting massive television rights deals on the fact that, well, there's nothing else on this night that does these type of numbers, so we'll pay all this money to the WWE. And now, thanks to the Biden economic boom, everyone's out of money. Everyone's hurting right now. The people didn't have, to put it to you this way, you can give away those billion-dollar deals during the Trump era, but during the Biden era, people don't have that money to just throw around right now, especially with pro wrestling. Spencer dropping in says my stream ran a bit late, but he's here. Yeah, so we're basically, I've been talking about for the start of the show, because kind of the whole situation about WWE and the TV deals right now. So it's not looking good for these pro wrestling companies right now, because everyone's pretty much looking for a TV deal. Everyone's looking for a major 9-figure contract from one of these media giants like NBC and Warner Brothers and Disney, and there's just not a lot of money there at the moment for pro wrestling. It's just not, and I think that the dominoes are finally starting to fall here. It's been a while. It's been a while, right? Yeah, the only one who looks good is Cena Vince. Vince, who basically looks like a 1930s sleazy Hollywood producer now, right? And that's essentially what he looks like. He's like 70. He's like 78 right now or something like that. It's just ridiculous. And then there's rumors about him possibly stepping down again, which I don't believe at the moment. I think Vince is going to die before anyone ever brings him down, because he's Vince McMahon. But if by some weirdo scenario that Vince were to step down and Stephanie McMahon were to take control of this company, like, you talk about being cooked, WWE will be cooked if that were to happen. Like, that would be the absolute worst case scenario for everyone involved if Stephanie McMahon took over WWE at this point. You pretty much just like cash in your checks and go home, because it wouldn't, what's the old Tucker saying? It's never been more over than it is right now. That would be it's never over situation if that were to happen. Yeah, exactly, right? People actually thought that they can Me Too Vince McMahon out of his own company last year, and then they were somehow upset when that didn't happen because, yeah, it's Vince McMahon. He's a carny. Like, you can't just get rid of a guy like that. It's not going to work. So that's what's going on. Like I said, keep an eye on what happens with Raw and NXT, because that's going to be the next big move. The SmackDown deal is not really impressive as it sounds like when you actually put in the numbers, because now Raw and NXT are going to have to make a deal. And if it's significantly less than what they were getting before, or if they don't get a big deal with like an Amazon or something like that, it's going to be a whole lot of hurt. And if they get a whole lot of hurt, a whole lot of people are going to get let go from the company. So this can only be the beginning of a lot of people getting fired here in the next few months for the WWE. But all I know, we're in a wrestling boom. Everything's big and great now. It's like, yeah, good luck with that one. Let's switch gears real quick before we start talking about this movie, because speaking of companies failing and companies losing a bunch of money, this is a perfect example of just why some people are just really, really stupid. Disney being one of them, because Disney now is paying ridiculous amounts of money for absolute garbage that nobody wants to watch. And one of these movies is The Marvels, aka Captain Marvel 2, which comes out in a couple of months. So if you guys have been following this story, for the last couple of, I guess last, 18 months now, this movie has been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. I think this was in the can back in like 2020, and it was supposed to come out last summer, and it got pushed back 5 times since. It's now slated to come out in November, finally. And there's been numerous reshoots on this whole thing, but it's finally coming out. I think it was Vanity Fair came out with an article earlier this week saying, the budget of this film is only $130 million. This is the cheapest MCU film ever. And everyone, and I mean everyone, immediately called BS on that. Like, there is no effing way this film only cost $130 million. This is a big budget MCU film where most of it is blue screen and CGI anyway. There's absolutely no way they only spent $130 million on this. Well, then, like, literally 24 hours later, Forbes came out and said, no, actually, it's like $274 million. So, yeah, we were actually wrong on that. John wrote this article earlier. Yeah, people right away just like there's no way, there's absolutely no way. Vanity Fair originally reported that the film was going to cost $130 million in a recent expose with the film's director Nia DaCosta. However, Vanity Fair has since updated their article, removed any mention of the film's budget because they were wrong and they got severely embarrassed. Apparently they were going back to like an article that came out like years ago saying that the budget was only $130 million. So some knucklehead at the Vanity Fair didn't properly do their research. It just went off of an old article and didn't notice that the information was wrong. But that's what you get when you got a bunch of hack frauds writing your website. This was the one, I guess they were trying to claim that, this is going to be the biggest box office movie with a black woman ever, and then you end up getting the information like completely wrong in and of itself. But I guess the real numbers eventually came out, and because of the whole like CGI thing, and here's the thing with the CGI, I want you to take a look at this picture right here. This is one with what's her name, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. And she's sitting in this room, and it has like the Captain Marvel stuff. What a lot of people don't realize is that what the MCU and these Disney shows have done is that they don't even build actual sets like this anymore. Like, you're seeing something that looks like a set that she's sitting like they built a set that's portrayed to be her room. You find out now that a lot of this stuff is done in blue screen. So what you think is actually like a room that they built that they can shoot in, that the character can like sit in and whatnot, is like an actual room set. No, it's actually blue screen. A lot of this stuff is done in post-production. This is why their shows are so expensive. This is why they spend so much money producing these shows, is because they don't even put in the effort to actually build a legitimate set for them to use. They just rely on everything. Everything's in post-production now. And this is why shows like this stink, and this is why they spend so much money. But Yeah, but it turns out that this film is probably going to end up costing about $300 million. I think it was reported that it was about 270 was the actual cost to date. That's with the reshoots. But they did say that they get like a tax credit from like the UK, so that should take up like $50 million of that cost. So, and then I heard another. No, we'll talk about that one. And another said that was for Snow White. But yeah, this film's going to have to make a lot of money in order to see any cash back. Like if this number is true, and we are talking about, let's say at the very least $250 million just in marketing alone before you, obviously in production alone before we start getting into marketing, you're looking at a film that probably has to make somewhere between 700 to 850 to break even, and that's probably a very conservative best case scenario option for this film. And no one's talking about the fact that Brie Larson isn't very likable. Now, to be fair, Brie Larson has shut up over the last few weeks, and that has more to do with the writer strike going on right now because, nobody can promote anything. That's probably a good thing for this film because they owe a lot of money. But yeah, I mean, this movie is going to have to do astronomical numbers, and I just don't see there being any way that this could possibly happen here. I just don't see it. Poor Jacobs alone. No, I'm like it because I could just got ranting about WWE for like 30 minutes, so I got a lot off my chest there. So yeah, this movie is they're in the mud right now, and Disney is also in the mud once again because their other film that they have coming out next year is probably also worth $300 million as well. So the Snow White remake that looks absolutely horrible, and this is the thing, like. I legitimately have to ask if Disney is involved in any kind of like money laundering scheme or if they deal with any kind of illegal activity whatsoever right now, because they're saying that they spent $300 million to make this Disney Snow White remake, right? But we've seen the pictures from the set. They look horrendous. Like they look like something that like Spencer could have done like on a YouTube channel. He could just like got a camera for his room, gotten like 8 of his friends and filmed the movie like outside and probably with like the exact same quality. So it's like, where did this money go? Where did this money go? Like, did you give all of it to Gal Gadot? Did you give all of it to Rachel Zegler? Like, where is this money actually going? You spent $300 million on this movie, and it looks like absolute garbage. Like, is the picture here of the dwarfs? Okay, I don't think it's here in the article here, but there's a picture here of the dwarfs that just looks absolutely like horrendous. Like, it looks bad, and you're turning around and you're telling people, yeah, this cost us $300 million to make. I hope you guys know that. You're like, where did the money go? It's like when you send your best friend to Taco Bell to get you like 2 tacos, and he comes back and he told you that it cost me $200. It's like, how did you spend $200 at Taco Bell? It doesn't make any sense. Like you're looking for the receipt to try to figure out where the hell all that money went. And this is what I feel like with every Disney property now. We're pretty much gotten to this point. Yeah, I could go rant on for a lot of things here, but box office bomb queen. Yeah, keep in mind they're also going all in on her for what is this stupid Hunger Games remake that they got coming out pretty soon, which looks absolutely stupid. It's just, oh god, I don't know why they're doing this, but yeah, and Hollywood is running why they're bleeding money. So this is why this is why Disney can't spend money on Raw and NXT. This is why Disney can't buy the media rights for WWE right now, because they're too busy blowing billions of dollars on this shit. Like $300 million on this absolute garbage. Like, someone should get fired just for that alone. I'm not even joking. Like, if I found out that you spent $300 million on a movie and this was the best that you can do, like, I would fire everyone, and then I would have to consider whether it was even worth it to release it at that point, because they're going to have to spend like $250 million to market this garbage to try to get people hyped to see it, which means that you're going to have to spend even more money to get people to watch the turd that you've already burnt money on. Like, at what point do you just say, okay, you know what, we're just not gonna spend any money on this. We'll just eat it. It's like going to like the car shop and they tell you that, yeah, it's going to cost you like $500 to get your spark plugs fixed and fix your pistons. You're like, yeah, okay. I mean, I ain't got much of a choice. I'll just eat the cost. I mean, that's pretty much where you're at right now. I was close to spending 30. Yeah, in Washington. Yeah, absolutely. Like even I think the last time I was in Taco Bell here, like I mean, you can get a box for like $10 now, but yeah, it's definitely not nearly as cheap as it used to be. Like even like a really like dingy looking taco was like $3 now, and it's like how did this happen? Like wasn't this stuff like 50 cents like 3 years ago? Like why am I spending $3 on this now? Disney buying WWE, they would have to remove all the manliness and all the women bodybuilders if they do that. I don't know, man. I mean, they probably love all that stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure that if Disney bought it, you would have like more non-binary gender queers like on the show, and then Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch would be your world champions, beating Sami Zayn or some nonsense like that. So, like I said, a lot of people were talking about, oh, yo, Disney should purchase WWE. Like WWE under Disney would be an absolute nightmare. Like it's just an absolute nightmare to watch. His sister got a plain hamburger, meat and blood, large fries. It was $12. Yeah, and you're in like in Arizona, so like I can only imagine like what the prices are in like California right now. It's just astronomical. I mean, I know my buddy just sent me a picture this week saying that they're paying nearly $7 a gallon in gas in San Diego and LA right now. It's like, yeah, that's great. I paid $3.20 where I'm at right now because I'm not in a crap old city, but I can imagine for in a lot of places it's just astronomical and ridiculous. But hey, at least we got $300 million to spend on garbage tier Disney movies. So there's always a light at the end of the tunnel right now, right? We're fine. We're doing fine financially as a country. You know, everything costs more. Our money is worth less. We're just doing great. This Biden economic boom, 2020, baby. I have not been to any fast food places. Honestly, awesome one, you're not missing anything. You can just stay at home and keep whatever little money that you have left because everything costs like an arm and a leg now. It's not even worth it. I moved away from the West Coast and you can't. Yeah, exactly. Technically, I moved out before you did. It took you a while to finally come to your senses, but you did eventually get out of there. So. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for this story. It's just the ridiculous amount of money that these companies are spending on these films, and it just baffles me that it feels like no one really cares. Like you know what I mean? Like it feels like to me like no one truly cares about quality. No one really truly cares about the art form anymore. It's like there's absolutely no heart in these in these new movies anymore. There's just absolutely like no heart. There's no drive. Everyone's just kind of half-assing things at the moment, and I don't know. I just feel like that if this was my money, I would have a much more of a respect and much more of a care about the stuff that I was putting out there. But it just seems like these people just don't care because it's like, hey, it's a multinational billion-dollar multi-corporation. It's not our money, so why do we give a crap? So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe we as the viewer should start feeling the same way. That it's like, hey, you guys don't care, then maybe we don't care. So that's it for this portion of the story. So that was a pretty good rant there. I got to rant about some things about WWE, rant about some things in Hollywood. So if you're listening to this story and you're thinking to yourself, oh, why won't Shamra Sapper report about this stuff? It's because he's a mark. It's because he's a freaking mark, and that's the reason why we got to this point here. But let's go ahead and talk about the movie of the night, what you've all have come here to see. It is the Expendables, Expend4bles. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce this name. This whole title's dumb. This whole movie's dumb. Okay, let's talk about this here for a second because there's a little backstory here before we get to the actual movie. So the Expendables was a franchise that started, I think, like 2008, I want to say it was the first one, somewhere in the late 2000s. And the idea for the movie was, hey, you know what? Let's get some of these 80s action stars who aren't exactly, on the top of their game anymore. But I mean, hey, people still like them. People still like the name Stallone and Schwarzenegger and Van Damme and Seagal and all these names, Dolph Lundgren. Let's get all of these super badass 80s action heroes and put them together in this super, super manly action movie where it's basically just like an action all-star league, right? Let's just do something like that and make money. And it worked. It did work for a while here. The Expendables franchise was a pretty big hit for the time that it was. The first movie came out in 2010, so I was correct there. It was 2010 when it came out, and it did excite a lot of people. You had, like I said, Jason Statham, Jet Li, Dolph Lundgren. You had Randy Couture, Stone Cold Steve Austin. You had Mickey Rourke, Terry Crews. So it was testosterone overload when it came to like that film. And it was like, yeah, let's get a bunch of old action heroes, put them in a movie, have them kick some ass, and people were gonna love it. It made about $275 million at the time, which wasn't bad based on its budget. It got a lot of people interested, so for that alone, it was a success. And we went with it. And a couple years later, we got Expendables 2. Put in a little bit more money into it this time around. Brought back some of the old stars again. We were to add in Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, a few other names to the group. We even put Chuck Norris in the second one. Made a little bit more money, not too much more, but I mean, like I said, it was still a big hit, given it was like a rated R film at the time. Did about $315 million. If you want to adjust that with inflation, it was all good for you. But then a couple of years later, after that, they came out with Expendables 3. Now, this is where everything started to fall apart, because if you recall, what happened here is that it wasn't the fact that they did a movie with, they added a couple more stars. They added in Wesley Snipes, they added in Antonio Banderas, they added in like Ronda Rousey and a couple other people there. Mel Gibson was the bad guy in the last one. I think they had Harrison Ford was in the last one as well. And what happened is that apparently there was a leak on the internet where the film ended up leaking completely online, and most people decided to just, hey, you know what, we'll just go ahead and pirate this movie, and that'll be the end of it. Now, a lot of people in the studio blamed the piracy for the reason why the film didn't do that well, because this one, despite having the same budget as Part 2, only made about $214 million, which is $100 million less than the last one. And like I said, I think a lot of people kind of look back at that whole thing saying that, if it wasn't for the duplication and distributing from the illegal leak so that people saw it before the movie was ready. If I remember it, if I remember exactly, I think it leaked out maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the actual film was supposed to come out, and people just went and saw it online. And it was like, that's not really worth my time, and that's what really hurt it. I know Lionsgate had like a big lawsuit that happened shortly after that. There was like a digital copy that was like stolen. It was uploaded on torrents. It was a whole mess. Like it was a pretty big mess at the time. And once that happened, once they lost that much money on the deal, they just decided, you know what, we're not going to do any more of these. It's like we're done. We're going to go in another direction. And it took them almost 10 years for them to be like, okay, well, let's do another one. Well, here's your problem. Here's your first problem with Expendables 4. Apparently, the producers of this film wanted to squeeze Sylvester Stallone out of the franchise. About the first 2 weeks of shooting this film, after they wrapped up, Sylvester Stallone posted a post on his Instagram page, pretty much saying that, hey, after all the years with this franchise, I'm done. I'm passing the torch. It's all over with here with the Expendables franchise. So you guys run with it. And then I was like, well, that's usually not a good sign, especially when you figure out what happened with him and Rocky. If you haven't been following the Rocky saga, he pretty much got squeezed out of that as well. He's been fighting to get the rights back in some capacity, but I think it's MGM who runs that at the moment. Doesn't really want him around. They've tried to give the franchise to Michael B. Jordan and have it focus more on him. I don't know how well that's going to work, because everyone knows that Sylvester Stallone is Rocky. You can't just replace Rocky with a more diverse counterpart. Even if he is related to someone within the Rocky universe, you're still taking away the heart and soul of this entire series. Like, there is no Rocky without Sylvester Stallone. So it doesn't make any sense to me. But the Expendables decided, hey, we're going to do the same thing here. So you watch the first 3 movies. I think the first 2 are pretty good, especially for like badass action movies. That's all that you're in for. The first 2 are pretty much the best you're going to get. The third one, not so much. They tried to rely too much on drama. Even though Mel Gibson was a pretty decent villain for that film, it just wasn't at par of the other 2 movies. This one, you have a lot of problems, because now with a lot of the guys, you can't bring them back. As you know, Bruce Willis, who had a big role in the first three movies, he's been going through, health issues now, so it forced him to retire. He can't really do the role anymore. Arnold Schwarzenegger is obviously doing his own thing now. You can't bring back like Wesley Snipes and Cliff Van Damme and all these other guys. So you think to yourself, okay, well, we've already gone through all of the 80s action heroes. We've already gone through all the big name 80s stars here. Who are we going to bring back? Who's going to essentially be the draw for this franchise? Who's going to be the person that's going to put the butts in the seats? And they decided, hey, you know what? Let's go with Hollywood heavyweight Megan Fox. Megan Fox is going to put butts in seats, right? Because it's like 2023 and she hasn't been relevant since like the second Transformers movie. And we'll talk about Megan Fox here in a second because we definitely need to talk about her. But so it's like, okay, we don't have Schwarzenegger this time. We don't have Stallone we don't have Willis this time. We don't have Harrison Ford, Chuck Norris, Mel Gibson. Like, who do we have here? We have Megan Fox and 50 Cent. 50 Cent, who's not even, let's be honest, is not even like a real actor. Yeah, he's produced like a bunch of shows for, I think, Stars or like whatnot. But when you think of 50 Cent, you don't think of acting. You don't think of, action star when you think of 50 Cent. So it feels like right out of the back here, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel trying to find anyone who can fill the shoes of this series. Like, that's essentially what you're doing. You're trying to find that, is there somebody out here big? And I thought about this while I was watching this movie here, is that I thought about the fact that like, who are gonna, if you were going to continue this franchise, who can you continue this franchise with? And to me, it's like, are we going to get to a point where like 10, 15 years, maybe 20 years from now, if we make it that long, are we going to get like Chris Evans and like Robert Downey Jr. to be like the old school, like, action movie stars? Like, are we going to go to like the superhero realm and like dig like Scarlett Johansson out of the ether to be like the next series of like Expendables films? Like, I mean, Keanu's already up there like in age now. So, I mean, if you were look, I'm not a Hollywood executive. I'm not a big time producer, but you think that, hey, can Keanu Reeves do a movie with us? Can he be the villain in a film? Like, that would be a draw, I would think, to see Keanu Reeves in the role of the villain for an Expendables movie. Like, I would think that would probably put more butts in seats than the Megan Fox in 2023. But this is what I'm talking about. So it's like, are we going to have to get like 40-year-old Tom Holland in like 20 years to keep this franchise going? It was like, this franchise had such a niche. It's like, okay, we need to bring back all the action stars from this specific time frame of like the 1980s, the Reagan era of films here, and bring them back. And yeah, we can sprinkle in a few guys from the 90s too to change things up. But like I said, the whole genre of action movies, especially here in the United States, it's been dead for a while. Like, superhero movies have kind of taken over that action genre where you don't really have a lot of true action heroes anymore. You just have actors playing superhero roles, and then this is like the case. This is where we're at now, right? And this is where we've gotten to. It's no one seems to have wanted to, I guess, correct this problem or figure out, okay, what is actually our next step here. Now, for this film, all you really have from the originals here, Randy Couture is still here because, I mean, he's like a retired old man at this point, so it's not like he has anything better to do. Dolph Lundgren is still here. Stallone is still here, but he's not in it much. We talked about that earlier. So now the only person that you have to carry this franchise is Jason Statham. Like, he's like the guy right now. And Jason Statham, I like him as an action star. I wouldn't say I like him as an actor because, I mean, he's pretty much been like the same role like over and over again. But he still has, draw as like an action guy if he's given like the right role. Like, if you haven't seen Wrath of Man, which is the movie that came out a few years ago, I believe that was Guy Ritchie who did that film. Great film. Like, I think it was one of my top films like the entire year. So you put him with the right guy, put him at the right setup, he still can draw out there. But he's also gotten to a point where he's so oversaturated that, like, we've seen him in the Fast and Furious movies. We saw him in the other Guy Ritchie movie earlier this year. He's in like the Meg 2. He's in this movie. So there's still something there with him as an action draw, but we've seen him so much now. It's like people have to really pick and choose at this point where they want to go see him. Like it's almost the same thing with like Liam Neeson and like and Nicolas Cage. Like you see them in so many movies. And if they're not hitting, then you gotta be like, do I really want to go see this particular movie over like somebody else here? Top Dog asks, what's next after the superhero genre? I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know where Hollywood goes like after this. I mean, we're kind of already in the era of them trying to replace action stars with like female lead counterparts. So you kind of have like the Netflix subgenre of female action movies, but those aren't drawing like big time. Like they're not. They're great for streaming content, but if you're trying to put them in the box office and be like, oh, we're gonna put like, let's say, I don't know, Rachel Ziegler in a role of like an action hero and expect people to go watch that, I don't think you're really there. So I don't know what's next for Hollywood creativity because they seem to not really care about their own creativity right now. That's just the way that it goes. Movies more like Glass Onion. I haven't seen the Agatha Christie one yet. The one that's out right now, I haven't seen it yet, so I can't gauge it. All I know is that the first one wasn't very good. The second one was certainly better, but I don't know how much legs that franchise has at this point. I have to look at the numbers because I haven't done that yet. But outside of that, I wouldn't know. So this is the setup here for Expendables 4. So like I say, you know all the guys who are in this film now. Um, like I said, it's a very light low. Let's just put it that way. But we start off this movie. It's in Libya because we're still screwing with Libya after all of these years. We haven't learned anything yet. And there's a mercenary group that's stealing nuclear warheads. They're trying to get a detonator for a bomb. And then, of course, Bernie Ross, played by Sylvester Stallone, has to bring his team there. And they have to save the guys from being kidnapped, being tortured. By the way, I will put this out here. I know there was a big story this week about the Aquaman. What was it? The Aquaman test screenings, because apparently people were like super upset that this is a spoiler just in case you guys care. I don't know if anyone really cares about Aquaman 2 at this point, but I guess at some point in the movie they kill a kid under some circumstances, and this upset a lot of people to the point where they actually like walked out of the movie, right? Well, if you don't like that, I probably wouldn't go see this movie, because about 10-15 minutes into this movie, who's the guy, Tony Jaa, who you guys have, sorry, not Tony Jaa, no, the other guy, what was it, U-Hauls, the guy from, what was it, The Raid, you guys know who I'm talking about there, the other guy, he's in the movie, he's the bad guy, he's the villain in the film, and like 10-15 minutes into this movie, straight up murders a kid, and I'm like just takes out a gun and blows the kid's brain out. Now, of course, you don't see it. You don't see like the blood spraying out of the brain matter pouring out of its head, but it's implied he pretty much like shoots the kid straight in the head like 10 minutes into the movie. So I was thinking about this, it's like, wow, if those people were upset over whatever happens in Aquaman, they were really gonna hate watching this movie 10 minutes in. So I don't know. I think that a lot of the negative reviews or maybe a lot of the negative reaction to this movie, it might have a lot to do with that, because they just straight up murder a kid. Like I said, not barely into the first act of the movie here, like right out of the gate. Black Manta's just skewers his kid. Yeah, I would say that this movie is even more brutal than that. So there you go. But yeah, that's your opening act up through the film here. So they going out to find a detonator because this guy wants to control like a bomb. There's a whole big shootout. You got 50 Cent going out there, blowing up all these cars. 50 Cent is basically like Mr. T, like in this movie. His name is like Easy Day. He's like the newest member of the group. But in all like reality, he's basically just like exactly. I was reading Rumble comment there, but no, he's basically like Mr. T in like an entire movie. He doesn't show much emotion throughout this entire film. He's kind of like there just to be like, wow, you guys are idiots, and then just like walk through. That's kind of like his whole thing. So it's not a great acting performance. It's also not an awful one either. So he's just kind of there for the most part. Like I said, Randy Couture is just there in the movie. He's still doing his whole running joke about his ear, which I'm pretty sure is a joke from like the very first movie. That's all they really have for him. Dolph Lundgren is in the movie. Dolph Lundgren is only in this movie to like occasionally get mad, like every now and then, just so you can remember he's actually in the film. But they don't do much with him at this point. And like I said, you're getting to a point where a lot of these guys are getting so old they just can't be like the super action stars they were anymore. Like Sylvester Stallone's almost 80. I know he tries to make it seem like he could still do all the crazy action stuff. I mean, look, he's 80 years old. Like, let's just be real at this point. Dolph Lundgren is like 65. Randy Couture, I think, is almost 60 at this point, or he is 60 years old. So you can't expect too much out of them. So what they want you to do is that they want you to, I guess, rely on like 50 Cent being kind of like the cool guy. They have what's his kid's name? Jacob Scorpio's in the film. He's playing the son of Antonio Banderas' character from the third movie. His entire presence in this film is basically just talking about how much he likes to have sex with women. That's like his whole running gag. They even call him like straight up a pervert at one point in time. That's really like that all he brings like to the movie. He's basically doing his best Antonio Banderas Puss in Boots impersonation throughout the entirety of this film. That's all they really have for him. And then outside of that, the film is carried by Megan Fox, who they decide to give the role of the leader in this film. She's the new de facto leader of the team here. And Megan Fox has, let's just say, gone off the deep end by quite a lot over the last few years. Just in case you guys haven't realized, she's become a full-blown witch in a lot of her social media work and interviews, and she's talking about all these encounters that she's been having and how she's drinking blood and putting death curses on people and stuff like that. So, and to keep in mind, this is a film that was shot, I believe, like 2 years ago. So I'm not particularly sure how far off the deep end she was when they were promoting this film, but she has not done herself any favors in the marketing side of things in the last 2 years since this film has come out. And I can't imagine the producers are too happy about some of the things that she's done and some of the things that she's said over the last couple of years, because like I said, she's in this film as kind of the de facto leader, which means that they would rely on her to promote this movie a lot. And with a lot of things that she's been doing, she's been saying, there's probably not going to help anyone to go watch this movie at this point. I'm just going to be honest with you. So yeah, they definitely screwed the pooch with their casting decisions here. But it's like I'm trying to understand like what exactly like they were doing here to make them think that this was a good idea. I mean, if you were going to put like if you were trying to do like a de facto woman leader like in this film, like I said, you could think of a bunch of other actresses with more range who would probably be better in this spot. I mean, like, who knows? You could have done something with Gal Gadot if you wanted to. I mean, Scarlett Johansson is another name that pops up out of my head, who probably would have been far better for this role than her. But I mean, she looks good. I mean, I'm not gonna say she doesn't look good, but I mean, she's also a weirdo too, so that kind of takes away from her looking good at the same time. So, a plastic looking witch at that, yeah, exactly. So there's kind of the situation that they have her in, and of course they have to do like kind of the girl boss like leader thing. It's not like nearly as obnoxious as you would see in like other movies. Like they don't go like overboard with it, but it's clearly there, and it really just goes to depend on how much you really I guess are in on Megan Fox as an actress at this point, because there is a point in the movie where Sylvester Stallone just disappears for a large portion of the movie. So if when Megan Fox isn't carrying the movie, it's Jason Statham. And if you don't like the dynamic of these two, then this whole movie is just going to fall apart for you. That's pretty much like what it is at the end of the day. This is a pretty short film for all intents and purposes. It's only about an hour 40 minutes, which I think is like one of the shorter Expendables movies of this series. There hasn't been a whole, I guess, a lot of... It's hard to tell how much they really put all in on this film after the whole leak situation, but I think these films have usually been about 2 hours. This one's just been a little bit shorter than I think they're usually used to. But in between there, like I said, everyone in the cast is pretty much just playing like an action trope. There's really no range or no emotion to have here in this film. The whole emotional connection, even though Megan Fox and Jason Statham are supposed to be dating in this film, the real emotional connection is with Jason Statham and Sylvester Stallone as friends, and they're both playing like these hard-nosed, like badass characters who really don't show much emotion. So when you're supposed to have a very emotional moment happen in the film, Jason kind of like no sells it. I'm not sure if this is just like his general direction. I just don't know if he's just not good at giving the emotion. But what's supposed to be like an oh my god moment for the audience just kind of feels like, I mean, it doesn't feel like he's really that broken up about it. So I mean, if he's not broken up about it, it's kind of hard for me to be broken up about it. It's just the way that they portrayed it in the movie. It doesn't really help matters here. But like I said, everything's just about, a MacGuffin. I think you have Andy Garcia that's also in this movie. Again, like I said, I think he's the guy that basically replaced Bruce Willis after Bruce Willis had to retire a few years ago. But the plot of this whole thing, just in case you didn't realize, we're trying to start World War III again with Russia. So this feels like this has been the plot of like every single action movie since the 1980s, where it's like, oh, we're going to war with the Russians. Oh, if we blow up this territory, the Russians are going to go to war with us. And I thought this while I was in the theater too. It's like everyone thinks that World War III is going to be like, oh, Russians versus Americans, one night only, and all that stuff. I'm thinking to myself, I don't think World War III is going to go down the way you guys think that is going to go down. I don't think that's, like, obviously we're having all these films trying to recreate this dream of two nations going together in a heavyweight nuclear war. It's like, I don't think that's what World War III is going to be. I think World War III is going to be a collection of nations going against one. And there's a certain book that talks about that, but we'll talk about that on Nerd Day. Maybe on Monday we'll discuss that whole thing. But it's such a reused, just repetitive trope of, oh, the Russians, because they have the nukes, so that means they're going to use the nukes against us, and we got to start some kind of international incident to make Russia the bad guy, or actually are we the bad guys because it's the intelligence agencies. And it's like, look, I get it. This film is based on 1980s like action tropes where you just put out a name. It doesn't really matter the plot of anything to the film, and people will just watch it. But for something like this, especially since this is the first movie you guys have done in like 10 years, if you really want to revive this franchise, you got to do something that really makes people be like, oh yeah, the Expendables is back. And they didn't do this. And it shows, because it seems like everyone virtually phoned this in. And I don't know what personal reasons led to that one, because we did know that there was things going on with Sylvester Stallone behind the scenes, but it just felt like everyone in this movie just absolutely phoned it in. It was like, hey, we're going to do another one, I'll get paid, and then I'm going to go back to doing like my 8 VOD movies of the year that I have like 5 minutes of airtime in, and then I'll get paid like $2 million. Like, it feels like everyone just phoned it in for the most part, and there's no real heart to this movie. There's no real style. I think if you're in the mood for just an action movie and you just want to watch something for a couple of hours and just kind of enjoy the mess that you're watching, if you just want to see things blow up and people get shot and you just want to completely turn your brain off and not think about anything, I think it's an okay time, but I just don't see I just don't see what would drive a member of the audience or a normie out to a movie theater to be like, oh, I gotta go see this movie. Like, people complained that the last one got leaked out to the internet. In all honesty, I'm just gonna be straight up with you. This is a film where you can just wait for this movie to come out on, like, what is it? Who owns this one? Lionsgate? So whether they be on like Paramount Plus or like NBC or something like that, you can just wait for this to come out on a streaming service in a few months and you won't miss anything. You can watch it at home. You're not really missing anything as far as like action. I mean, there isn't anything in this movie that they haven't done in like several other movies like leading up to this. At this point, it's just been shoot up a bunch of things, blow up a bunch of things, witty one-liners, really forced dialogue between characters who are trying to seem more bromance than they really are at this point. I think the biggest sin of this movie is that it's just very generic and very cookie cutter, and as a result of that, it's very hard to emotionally invest in the movie. So I didn't hate it. I can't sit here and say that this is an awful movie. Like, I won't say that, but the just sitting there just watching the movie, I just couldn't feel anything for it. So if I'm gonna give this movie a rating based on what I saw or based on what I'm seeing, I gotta give it somewhere like a 2 out of 5. I think that's probably a fair rating for this film. If you want stuff blowing up, if you want, just butt kicking adventure because you can't get your superhero fix, then go watch it. I mean, you'll be entertained for a little bit. I don't know how upset you're going to be about seeing kids get shot, because that does happen at some point. But I guess to make you feel better, some guy gets burned alive for basically just being a dick. I think that's another thing that happens in the movie. No, I won't spoil when that occurs, but that is something that happens throughout the course of this film here. And I don't know. It's just kind of just soulless and disappointing for the most part. But it wasn't like I've seen movies this year where I've just been like, okay, this is awful. This is one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Like, this isn't like Joyride level bad by any stretch of the imagination. This is just a movie where it's like, it's not great, but I'm just more indifferent to it than I am actually upset. Like, it's one of those movies where I could just look at it and be like, you know what? You guys were probably better off just giving up on this thing 10 years ago when you had the chance, because this one doesn't have any of the flair or any of the soul that the other movies had, because they didn't bring back a lot of the guys who people actually wanted to see. Like I said, no Schwarzenegger, no Willis, no Harrison Ford, no Gibson, no Van Damme. Like, all those guys are gone here. So when you don't have anyone who would be a draw, this is what you're left with. Just kind of a subpar action film here. Like I said, I kind of try to think of who else could they have to replace, but this is kind of the problem of Hollywood. Hollywood has killed the action star. Action stars are kind of dead now. So when you try to think of, okay, who's someone in, like, let's say the last 20 years who we can bring back to be a big name action star, like who was a big action star in the 2000s? That we can bring in to be a big star in this movie. And then you have to kind of like scratch your head and be like, well, who was a big action star in the 2000s? Like, does Christian Bale count? I was like, yeah, not really. I mean, the Batman movies weren't really known for their action. They're kind of more for their drama. So it's like, who do you bring in that's going to actually who's actually going to do work here? Spencer asks, who were the protagonists in this film? Was it 50 and Megan? Yeah, they were all the good guys. Like I said, the guy from The Raid is like really the only bad guy in this film, and even he plays a very, very generic role, like in the movie. But it's implied that everyone else outside of him is the good guy. So everyone's basically a protagonist. But like I said, 50 Cent for delivering his emotionless lines, I guess, wasn't awful. Like I said, he just came off more as like a Mr. T. Like he was trying to do like a Mr. T impersonation throughout this entire film. So that's kind of his role throughout this. And then Megan Fox was trying to play like the sexy assassin type deal, who was just crazy, because I think like the first 5-10 minutes of this movie, there's literally just like a very awkward scene where Stallone walks in on Megan Fox and what's his name, Jason Statham, while they're arguing, and she's just like yelling at him, having like a meltdown, and it's supposed to be played off as laughs, right? Like, it's supposed to be like, oh, she's having one of those moments, and it's like one of those like quirky couple fights type thing, but it's just like, she doesn't sound like it didn't come off as funny. Like, I know it was supposed to be played off as humor, but it wasn't nearly as funny as the writers thought it was in their mind. And that's kind of like the problem here. It's like, the people, they wrote everything down on a piece of paper, but they didn't actually have any of the soul, any effort to bring it to life, I guess you could say. Like, everyone was just delivering their lines flat. There was no real true emotion that was believable throughout the course of this film. So it's like a lot of this is just kind of just soulless and bare. Like, that's really the honest way that I can describe this movie. It's a whole bunch of nothing, like, at the end of the day. So would I recommend this film? Not really. I will say, if you want to watch this movie, just wait for it to come out in either VOD or a streaming service or something like that, and you can go watch it at home. You'll probably enjoy this movie far more at home with no real stakes than you will going out to a movie theater and wasting your time and the money to go watch this movie. There really isn't nothing here to be seen here. So, like I said, I think the fairest rating I can give this is a 2 out of 5. That is straight up. That's just how I feel. So it is what it is. Um, yeah, so that's it for Expendables. Look, I know I think it's Tubi, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Tubi has all three Expendables movies at the moment. Netflix might have them too, but I'm not sure like how long that those rights are for the Netflix series. So if you're really in the mood for Expendables films, if you have Tubi or Netflix, one of those two streaming services, just go back and watch the first two. At least the first two. Like I said, the third one's only really watchable because of Mel Gibson. If it wasn't for Mel Gibson, the third one really wouldn't be that whole. It wouldn't really be very worth it anyway. So, but the first two were good. So I say go back and watch those because those have a lot more to it than anyone else. So that's my fair rating for this film. For the Expendables 2, Expendables 4, sorry, I keep forgetting how many of these there actually been, but there's been 4 of them now. So, yeah, maybe don't go watch this one or don't waste your time. That's kind of what I feel about this one. One more story here before I go ahead and get out of here. There is one more thing I wanted to talk about, and it was oh man, I gotta bring this up because now I'm just gonna start laughing if I even think about this. Echo. Now, if you've been a fan of this channel for a while, I have been talking religiously about this show Echo. It is the dumbest thing in the entire world, and I'm unironically the only person in the entire world who is actually excited for this TV show. I have somehow worked myself into a shoot, and I'm unironically excited to watch this show when it comes out here. And later, I think it's like next year now. It's been delayed so many times, but sources as close to Echo have confirmed that the MCU series will now be a 5-episode series instead of 6. Let me just tell you guys how we got here. Disney's decided that it would be a good idea to book an actress who has never acted in her entire life in a series that they did for Hawkeye about 2 years ago. It was the character they had her play was a deaf, one-legged Native American comic book character who was one of the hitmen for the bad guys, who inexplicably turns into a good guy towards the end of the film. And they decided, oh, this character is so over, let's give her her own Disney Plus series. Keep in mind, this is an actress who cannot speak because she is deaf in real life. She is actually one-legged in real life. And she cannot act because she's never acted in anything in her life. Now, look, I get it. I'm not crapping on this actress because at the end of the day, it's kind of a really crappy position to be put in. Like, put it to you this way: if I were to give Duke Nukem his own Disney show, he's never acted in anything in his entire life, and I gave him 6 episodes to be the star of a show, I should not expect him to do a good job because he's woefully unqualified to leave a 6-episode Disney Plus series. So I should not expect him to be good. I should not expect this lady to be good in any stretch of the imagination. It is not her fault that Disney put her in a position where she was woefully unqualified to be in. That is not on her. That is on Disney. But here we are. And they found out that this show is awful. They found out that multiple times they had to reshoot things. They had to readjust. They said that the special effects were not that great. They said that the stunt choreography was not great. I know it's shocker. It's hard to teach stunt choreography to a woman who can't hear. Can't hear words. So you literally have to have like an on like site like sign language dude there to kind of explain the direction, which I can only assume is a complete pain in the ass, for being honest with you. So I even feel bad for the guys who tried honestly to make this work, but couldn't. But this is the turd sandwich that they had to polish up here, and now it's so bad. It was supposed to be, I think, a 12-episode arc. They turned into a 6-episode arc. Then they said, you know what? We're not even going to release it week after week. We're just going to release it all at once so that we can wash our hands with it. And then they decided again, you know what? Let's wait another couple of months because we still got some more work to do and it's not great. And now all of a sudden here they are. Well, you know what? We're just going to go ahead and cut this down to 5 episodes now instead of 6 because we need to work out some pacing. There was some bad pacing that happened here. So we're just going to cut out Here's what they're saying when they say this, because you have to read in between the lines. What they're saying here is that we have so little for the justification for this show to even exist after everything that we've shot over the last few years. We can only justify 5 episodes of this utter trash, because if we include any more to this, we're going to bore our audience to tears and they're probably going to cancel the network. That's how bad it is. And this is how bad. This is why wrestling fans, you wrestling fans who were listening earlier, this is why Disney cannot afford Raw and NXT, because they're spending all their money on utter garbage just like this. So when I tell you Disney has no money, this is why. This is why they have no money. No, so Spencer said I thought they canceled this. No, but I believe they canceled. I think Ironheart has been canceled, and Ironheart is the series that they've really just kind of memory hold over the last few months, because they were going all in on the production, on the promotion of that show when they were announcing like the drag queen was going to be on there, and then like the trans woman who cut off her breast is going to be on there. Then after a while, they just went silent, and then the next thing you know, it's like this show was removed off the schedule indefinitely, and as of right now, we don't even know if that show is ever going to see the light of day. They say that it's still on the shelf at the moment, but we don't know if that show's ever going to actually like see light at this point in time. So that show is, look, as much as I'm crapping on this show, Ironheart might unironically be worse than Echo. And I know that sounds weird because I just buried the hell out of Echo, but I think Ironheart might be legitimately worse. And if it's so bad that even Disney won't release it, that's saying something. Because say what you want about Echo, they're still at least trying to figure out a way to release this shit. But they haven't said a word about Ironheart in like 5 months. So if they're being silent on Ironheart, that means it's really bad. That means that it's just an abomination of a television series there. It's awful. So yeah, Echo is now being trimmed to 5 episodes. I can only imagine how bad this thing is going to look when it's all said and done, but it looks awful right now. But I still going to be a fan for it. I might be the only Echo simp in the entire world, but I will proudly simp for this show, because this is going to be one of the worst things that I've ever laid my eyes upon. And I watched She-Hulk, and I can't wait for every second of this show to be just as bad as I imagined it in my mind. So Echo is coming out sometime in 2024. Eventually, Disney's going to release this thing. They've been pushing it about for months now. They can run, but they can't hide. You're gonna have to release this stuff sometime. Like you can't hide in your mama's house all day. You gotta come out sometime. So that's the way it's gonna be. Rest in peace, Echo. That's all I gotta say. So hey, and there you go. We've already reached the ending point of our show. So we talked about WWE tonight. We talked about Disney burning. I mean, that's really what they're doing now. They're burning all of their money on these absolutely horrid television shows and movies that they're working on. Because I mean, I imagine your upcoming portfolio being Captain Marvel 2, Snow White remake, and Echo. And you wonder why Disney is internally panicking right now. Because if that was my lineup, if that was the only films that I had for people to get excited about, I would probably burn everything in the office and then jump outside and hope a suicide net doesn't catch me. That's probably what I would do right now if I was Disney. Or if I wasn't a complete moron, I probably would have never greenlit this crap to begin with. Because that's what they deserve. But there we are. That's all the stuff that we have coming up for the show tonight. So I do want to thank you guys who joined me on here for this spontaneous episode of the Friday Night Movie Club. So that's Duke Nukem, Top Dog, DK, Spencer, obviously, Rob, who joined us in the chat tonight. Awesome one. Vanya, who joined us here tonight. I think I got everyone down on that one. So I'm going to let you know real quick what I got coming up before we sign off here. So next week, we're going to be reviewing the latest film, The Creator, with John Washington and that whole thing. I know we got a lot of context there with like the AI stuff and transhumanism, and we're going to see if Hollywood's preparing us for something that's going to be very, very sinister down the road, or maybe it's just actually a good movie. But we'll talk about that next Friday night. Then letting you guys know that after next week's show on the 29th, we're going to be changing up the Friday night show a little bit, because what's happened here is that due to the writer's strike, due to the actor's strike, a lot of these movies that were supposed to come out in October and November and December looking down, they've all been pulled, and there's really going to be no releases there. So because there's such a disruption in the amount of movies that are coming out, especially the quality of movies that are coming out these next few weeks, what we're going to do is that we're going to kind of blend the Friday night movie review show and movie night to be one show. So we're going to start doing weekly movie nights in October, and we're going to have people on to talk about some of the movies, talk about a little bit of the news regarding the movies, and then we'll watch the shows on our Rumble and our Twitch account. So if you haven't joined Rumble, we have a link in the description below right now, so go over there and check that out. I know we have like 115 followers on Rumble right now, so Rumble is growing. And then also go join us on Twitch as well, because if you can't find us on Rumble, I will be on Twitch. In a couple of weeks when we do the new format, we'll be on YouTube for about the first 30 minutes of the show. Then we'll shut off our YouTube. We'll go to Rumble. We'll go to Twitch. And then that's where we'll go watch the movie live with you guys in the chat too. So we're going to change up the format a little bit because we kind of have to with the lack of quality releases that we have coming out throughout the rest of the year. So we're going to have fun though, because we're going to do retro movies. We're going to do movies that we know are good, that actually have some commentary to be said about those films. So it's definitely going to be a positive change there. So look forward to that in a couple of weeks. But yeah, next Friday is going to be the creators, and then we're going to change things up in a big way in 2 weeks there. This Monday night, episode 11 of the Bible Lens podcast, we're taking a break from our series on the end times. The last 6 weeks we've been covering Islam, we'll be covering Catholicism, we'll be covering Judaism, and I'm pretty sure all of those religions are mad at me right now based on things that they said. But hey, you know what? If you have to tell the truth, you're going to have to make some people angry. That's just the way that it is. We're going to take a break from that, though. We're going to focus more kind of on the current world, because there's a lot of things in the world that people don't understand are actually created to separate themselves from God. And we're going to talk about what exactly those things are. So episode 1, or part 1 of our Do Not Love the World series, is going to talk about the sins of luxury and envy, and why luxury, money, and the worship of those things lead to envy and causes so much of the bad things in our world. It's going to be a good series to talk about, because we're really going to start talking about a lot of the things that people are struggling with these days, and we're going to try to help people kind of overcome those things by explaining to them why they're being manipulated and how they're being manipulated, so help them overcome a lot of the sins that they struggle with today. So it's actually going to be a pretty positive series we're working on the next few weeks, and it's going to start this Monday night at 8 p.m. You guys know Johnny, Sam, and Connor will be back for those shows, so check us out on Monday. And then on Tuesday, we're going to be back with episode, I think, 67 of the Barroom podcast. I'll figure out what the format is going to be this weekend, but we'll be there on Tuesday night, so check us out then. I've given you guys all a big shout out there. There was a big Baptist revival. We might have to talk about this on one of our future shows. All I have to say is, just because something is called a revival, don't believe that there's an actual revival happening. And if you want a little insight into that, go back and watch episode 2 of our Bible Lens podcast of the compromise of the church, to go in some leading the things. But we'll definitely have to talk about that one in future episodes here. But we're going to break some things open here. But outside of that, thank you guys for joining me here tonight. We had a good night here, but I got to go sign off. So hopefully I'll see you guys Monday night, Bible Lens, Tuesday night, Barroom, Wednesday, Bounding in the Comics channel with the boys. And then, of course, Friday night we'll be back here. We'll see you one same time, same place. We are out of here. We're gone. Hitting the outro. I'll see you later. Later, guys.
It's over. Go home.
Get the hell out! Get out! Get out! Get out!
Okay.
Get out! Get out!